this book really surprised me. The first book surprised me. Do you know why? Because you see, I expected some of the best fantasy that I've ever read in my entire life. That was not the case. The Eye of the World was nowhere near some of the best fantasy I've ever read. It was average. It had great world building. It had great bros. But in terms of characters, in terms of dialogue, in terms of pacing, it was, I would say, below average. I would go as far as to say it really was not a great book. But I expected a great book because it's the first book in the Wheel of Time. I mean, let's be honest. It's the first book in the Wheel of Time. If a book in the fantasy genre is going to be great, it is going to be the first book in the Wheel of Time. I did like the prologue, the prologue to the Eye of the World, and essentially how it establishes Louis Therin, and how he went mad and he was the chosen one, he was the savior of the world, he was the dragon, and he essentially became like a madman. And I love this dichotomy that has been set up, this dilemma, right? This character dilemma, which is Rand as the dragon reborn. He needs to use Saidin because that's what you do. You need that power to save the world. But if he taps into that power, he risks going mad. And I really, really loved this. I loved this promise, this sort of, like a character dilemma that Robert was able to establish in the first book. But what ended up happening in the first book, there wasn't really much of that going on. And let's talk about the supporting cast in the first book. They were actually just completely empty characters, except for Matt, who was essentially, let's say, corrupted by the dagger that he got from Shadar Logoth and the ruby-hilted dagger. And that dagger essentially messed with his mind and sort of gave him this negative arc where he was attacking his friends like Moraine. And that was interesting. And he was even more interesting than the protagonist Rand. And I went as far as to say in the first book, in the review of the first book, that Matt should have gotten way more page count compared to Rand, or more of the story should have been told from Matt's perspective, because he was just far more interesting than Rand. However, I am happy to announce in the second book, not only is Rand as a character fixed, but all the other characters really have amazing progress in their character arcs. Let's talk about the specifics, okay? I absolutely love Randall Thor, and I finally really came to understand why he's such a great protagonist, because you remember the character conflict I just talked about? He needs Saidin to save the world, but if he uses Saidin, he also risks losing himself. Well, Rand also happens to really want to go back to his normal life. He wants to return to normalcy, He wants to go back to his comfort zone. But the story has pushed him so far from that, and it seems to, be pushing him further and further and further away from essentially Emond's Field, from the comfort, the familiarity. And this creates a beautiful dichotomy because there is one very important, very crucial reason why he should tap into Saidin. But there are two other reasons, him wanting to go back to his normal comfort life, but also him likely going mad. These two reasons are against, and the character dilemma that was established in the prologue of The Eye of the World and throughout the rest of The Eye of the World is fully tapped into. And I have sort of expected this, a hint of this was given by the finale of the first book, because that was a great setup for this great, second book. And so Rand's character becomes not just better, he actually becomes one of the most unique fantasy protagonists I have ever seen, because tell me a chosen one that if they tap into the power, you're likely going to become a villain, or something like that. Like, there is nothing like that in the fantasy genre. It is only a Wheel of Time theme, and I just love Randall Thor far more right now. I love the portal gates. In two separate occasions where he uses the portal gate, he has to tap into Saidin to do that. And this is a dilemma that he's also presented with, right? I also love, there's this entire chapter toward the middle of the book, I believe, where an old statue is being dug up. And, that statue is laced with Saidin. It has a lot of Saidin in it. And so he's also tempted again. Heck, toward the finale, even the dark one, Balsamon, he tempts Rand and he offers him, to be his mentor, some sort of a mentor, and to teach him how to tap into Saidin. And it's so beautiful, all of these moments, all of these character moments, they essentially depict this portrait of Rand as this boy who is struggling, who is absolutely struggling with his old life, his desire to go back to it, but also his newly found duty. And essentially, to put it in this way, Rand is very well tested in the second book. He's not just very well tested, he is brilliantly tested. The end of the finale of book 2 sets up a great conflict for him in book 3, which makes me suspect something, a forecast, some sort of a prophecy. Yes. And it is that I think the third book will likely be better than the second book. I really smell that from a mile. So the primary reason why is because, Rand's character, essentially, like everyone now in Falme, everyone knows, Tomenhead, the port city, Falme, everyone knows that he is the Dragon Reborn and he was fighting Balsamon. And that means essentially his journey to becoming the Dragon Reborn fully has been accelerated by 1,000-fold, right? So that is one reason, right? Another reason is Matt. So I was kind of happy that in the second book, toward the finale of first book, there's this setup. Well, it's not stated and it's not obvious, but I did sort of extract it. And it is that Matt likely will go to the White Tower and they will essentially rescue him from Shadal Ogoth. My hope, however, because of Badan Fane, who starts the Great Hunt by stealing the horn of Valir, as well as the Matt's dagger, the ruby-hilted dagger. Well, technically, what ends up happening is that the whole book is a chase trying to get the dagger back. So he cannot be really cured in the second book, but he's weakened because he's disconnected from it. My hope for book 3 is that not only is he cured, but he also becomes more mature, while, still having, still being Matt, but also, just more responsible. I think that's one, because a lot of the times it is established that Matt is just not that responsible and he's very rebellious. I think an obvious character arc for him is to become an adult, to put it that way, technically just become an adult, while also maintaining, that Matt charm, you don't want to lose the Matt charm, because the Matt charm makes Matt, if he loses it, he's no longer Matt. However, he can still be that, Matt while also being mature. And I think that conflict can be really awesome. I do hope that his character gets better. Those are the two reasons why I think, the third book might be better than the second book. It's Rand and his character and the setup for him, and also the setup for Matt. A surprise character for me is Ingtar, the lord and the leader of the Shanaran party that Rand and Berin and Matt join with this sniffer Hurin. And that is really awesome, primarily because his character, he has some sort of a positive character arc, and that is very beautiful, specifically when they go through the portal stones the second time, and they, the whole party experiences thousands of lifetimes. That's really awesome. And so that brings him to sort of the light side, because he was the one who armed an assassin toward the beginning of the story, I believe, to almost kill Rand and the Emerlin Seat, the leader of the Aes Sedai. So that's really awesome. I love these characters. I love, heck, even Egwene and Nynaeve, they joined the Aes Sedai, and the development is accelerated. Berin is also tested further because they are disconnected from Hurin. Sniffer, Hurin, and Rand get disconnected, and that means Perrin now has to step up. And that's really awesome. That's one way to test his character. And there is a lot to love about this book. And all of it, in my opinion, has to do with the characters. Again, the plot, remember, the plot with the Eye of the World, it was mostly just running from location to location. Well, the Great Hunt, of course, it's a chase. It's a hunt. Well, guess what? That is also just going from location to location to location. So what makes the story very special, in my opinion, and the second book far superior to the first book, is how the characters are just far better written, and there is far more attention given to them, and there's a lot more variety in the perspectives and the POVs we get. We're not 99.99% of the time stuck with Rand. We are getting to see these other characters, heck, in wildly different locations, and that is amazing. And I hope to see more of that in the third book. So the plot is really not what makes this book special. It is, in my opinion, the characters, because I feel like finally the characters are just maturing, and they have been developing for more than 600,000 words. Finally, the world building. Let's talk about the world building. Oh, it's still very excellent, because we're going from location to location to location, and we also get to see more of the White Cloaks, which I was very curious in book 2, because we met them briefly and we got to understand they are these zealots, these religious zealots, but we get to see them a lot more now, and there are even perspectives from their side, and that's awesome. We see more of the Forsaken, more betrayals, and so on and so forth, right? And I love the world building. There's just so much to love about it. It's unbelievable. I love it. I love it so much. The prose and the dialogue, as usual, it's Robert Jordan. He never gets his prose wrong. His dialogue is still very good. And so prose and dialogue, I would say perfect. Well, there is a slight problem, and it is the pacing. Well, technically in Carthian, that whole chunk in Carthian where Rand goes after he essentially gets the Horn of Valir, as well as the dagger, they essentially go to this place, and there's whole shenanigans that happens, and it took a whole day for me to push through that, and that is 7 hours of reading, man. I didn't like that section at all. I thought it was so boring, because there was not much of a development in the characters, and it was just a whole plot shenanigans. The objective of that whole section was for Badan to steal the objects again, to get them back, basically. Well, that could have been achieved in so many better ways. We spent so much time in that section, it's unbelievable. So there was no need for that. Other than that, the pacing was really great. I have to commend Robert Jordan, honestly, for improving the second book, because so many authors will write a great first book and then they will write an okay second book. It is rare to find an author that not only maintains the quality of the world building, the prose, essentially the things that were good about book 1, but then fixes my biggest problem with book 1, which was the weak characters. In book 2, the characters are very, very strong, right? And I'm happy to say this is easily 5 out of 5. Oof, God bless. I'm so excited for book 3. It's unbelievable. And I hope that you enjoyed this review. I loved reading this book more than book 1 by 1,000 times, okay? And so that is where I'm going to end it. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.